This video is about organization of the central nervous system. So let's start learning. Major learning objectives include to describe the basic design of central nervous system, describe the major levels of central nervous system function. The central nervous system is unique in the vast complexity of thought process and control actions it can perform. Each minute it receives literally millions of bits of information from the different sensory nerves and sensory organs and then integrate all these to determine responses to be made by the body. Before beginning this discussion about the nervous system, the reader should read this carefully. So, prescribe the principles of membrane potentials and transmission of signals in nerves and through neuromuscular junctions. When we just learn this topic, learn the earlier topic along with this. The general design of the central nervous system. Central nervous system, neuron, the basic functional unit. The central nervous system contains more than 100 billion neurons. Typical neuron is a type found in the brain motor cortex. Incoming signals enter this neuron through the synapses located not only mostly on the neuronal dendrites but also on the cell body. 4 different types of neurons. There may be only a few hundred or as many as 200,000 such synaptic connections from input fibers. Conversely, the output signal travels by way of a single axon leaving the neuron. Then this axon may have many separate branches to other parts of the neuron. Nervous system or peripheral body. A special neuron of most synapses is that the signal normally passes only in the forward direction from the axon of the precoding neuron to preceding neuron to the dendrites on all cell membranes of subsequent neuron. This feature forces the signal to travel in required direction to perform specific nerve functions. Sensory part of the neuron system. Sensory receptors. Most activities of the nervous system are initiated by sensory receptors that excite sensory experiences that excite sensory receptors, whether visual receptors in the eyes, auditory receptors in the ears, tactile receptors in the surface of the body, and other kinds of receptors. Either of these receptor experiences of sensory experience can cause immediate reaction from the brain, or memories of the experience can be stored in the brain for minutes, weeks, or years, and bodily reactions determined by some future dates. So, somatic portion of the sensory system, which transmits sensory information from the receptors of the entire body surface and some deep structures. This information enters the central nervous system through the peripheral nerves and conducted immediately to multiple sensory areas, the spinal cord at all levels, the reticular substance of the medulla, pons and mesencephalon of the brain, the cerebellum, thalamus, and areas of the cerebral cortex. Motor part of the nervous system. Effectors. The most important eventual role of the nervous system is to control the various body functions. This is achieved by controlling contraction of the appropriate skeletal muscles throughout the body, contraction of the smooth muscles in the internal organs, and secretion of the active chemical substances by both exocrine and endocrine glands in many parts of the body. These activities are collectively called motor functions of the neuron system or nervous system, and the muscles and glands are called effectors because they are the actual anatomical structures that perform the functions dictated by the nerve signals. Skeletal motor nerve axis of the nerve system for controlling skeletal muscle contraction. Operating parallel to this axis is another system called the autonomic nerve system for controlling smooth muscles, glands, and other internal bodily systems. The system is discussed later. So, skeletal muscles can be controlled by many levels of central nervous system, including the spinal cord, the reticular substance of medulla, pons and mesencephalon, and the basal ganglia, and the cerebellum. The motor cortex. Each of these areas play its own specific role. The lower regions are concerned primarily with automatic, instantaneous muscle response to sensory stimuli, and the later regions are concerned with deliberate complex muscle movements controlled by the thought process of the brain. So processing of information, integrative function of the nervous system. One of the most important functions of the nervous system is the processing incoming information in such a way that appropriate mental and motor response will occur. More than 99% of all sensory information is discarded in the brain as irrelevant and unimportant. For instance, one is ordinarily unaware of the parts of the body that are in contact with clothing as well as of the seat pressure when sitting. Likewise, attention is drawn only to the occasional object in one's field of vision, and even the perpetual noise of other surroundings. Our surroundings is usually neglected to the subconscious. However, when important sensory information excites the mind, it is immediately channeled into proper integrative and motor regions of the brain to cause desired response. The channeling and processing of information is called integrative function of the nervous system. Thus, if a person places a hand on a hot stove, his desired instantaneous response is to lift the hand. Other associated responses follow, such as moving the entire body away from the stove and perhaps even shouting with pain. So, role of synapses in processing information. The synapse is the junction point from one neuron to the next. Later in this chapter, we discuss the details of synaptic function. So, however, it is important to point out here that synapses determine the directions that the nerve signal will spread through the nerve system. More synapses transmit signals from one neuron to the next with ease, whereas other transmit signals only with difficulty. Also, facilitatory and inhibitory signals from other areas in the nervous system can control synaptic transmission, sometimes opening the synapses for transmission and other times closing them. In addition, some postsynaptic neuron responds with a large number of output impulses and others respond with only a few. The synapses perform a selective action, often blocking weak signals while allowing strong signals to pass. But at other times, selecting and amplifying certain weak signals and then challenging the signals in many channeling the signals in many directions rather than in any one direction. In storage of information memory, only a small fraction of even the most important sensory information may cause immediate motor response, but much of the information is stored for future control of motor activities and for use in the thinking process. Most storage occurs in the cerebral cortex, but even the basal regions of the brain and the spinal cord can store small amounts of information. The storage of information is the process we call memory, and this too is a function of the synapses. Each time certain types of sensory signals pass through the sequences of synapse, these synapses become more capable of transmitting the same type of signal the next time. This process called facilitation. After the sensory signals have passed through the synapses a large number of times, the synapses become so facilitated that signals generated within the brain itself can also cause transmission of impulses through the same sequence of synapses even when the sensory input is not excited. This process gives a person a perception of experiencing the original sensations, although the perceptions are only memories of the sensations. The precise mechanism by which long-term facilitation of synapses occur in the memory process are still uncertain, but that is known as the other details of the sensory memory process. Once memories have been stored in the nervous system, they become part of the brain's processing mechanism for future thinking. That is the thinking process of the brain compare new sensory experiences with stored memories. The memories can help to select the important new sensory information and to channel this to appropriate memory storage areas for further use or into motor areas to cause immediate bodily response. Motor levels of central nervous system function. The human nervous system has inherited special functional capabilities at each stage of human evolutionary development. From this heritage, three major levels of central nervous system have specific functional characteristics. The spinal cord level, the lower brain or subcortical level, and the higher brain or cortical level. Spinal cord level. We often think of spinal cord as being only a conduct force signals from the periphery of the body to the brain, or in opposite directions from the brain back to the body. This is far from the truth. Even after the spinal cord has been cut in the high neck region, many highly organized spinal cord functions still occur. For instance, neuronal circuits in the cord can cause walking movements, reflex that withdraw portions of the body from painful objects, reflexes that stiffen the legs to support the body against gravity, reflexes that can control local blood vessels, gastrointestinal movements, or urinary excretion. In fact, the upper levels of nervous system often operate not only sending signals directly to the periphery to the body, but also by sending signals to the control centers of the cord, simply commanding the cord centers to perform their functions. Lower brain or subcortical level. Many, if not most, of what we call subconscious activities of the body are controlled in the lower areas of the brain, that is, in the medulla, pons, and the mesencephalon, hypothalamus, thalamus, cerebellum, and basal ganglia. For instance, subconscious control of arterial pressure and respiration is achieved mainly in the medulla and pons. Control of equilibrium is a combined function of older portions of the cerebellum and the regular reticular substance of the medulla, pons, and mesencephalon. Feeding reflexes such as salivation and licking of the lips in response to taste of food are controlled by areas in the medulla, pons, mesencephalon, amygdala, and hypothalamus. In addition, many emotional patterns such as anger, excitement, sexual response, reaction to pain, and reaction to pleasure, etc., can occur. Distortion of both much of the cerebral cortex. Higher brain or cortical level. After the preceding account of many nerve system functions that occur at the cord and lower brain levels, one may think, what is left for the cerebral cortex to do? The answer to this question is complex, but it begins with the fact that cerebral cortex is extremely large memory storehouse. Cerebral cortex is an extremely large memory storehouse. The cortex never functions alone, but always in association with lower centers of the nervous system. The cortex never functions alone, but always in association with the lower centers of the nervous system. Without the cerebral cortex, the functions of the lower brain centers are often imprecise. The vast storehouse of cortical information usually converts these functions to determine and precise operations. Finally, the cerebral cortex is essential for most of our thought process, but it cannot function by itself. In fact, it is the lower brain centers, not the cortex, that initiate wakefulness in the cerebral cortex. Thus opening its bank of memories to the thinking machinery of the brain. Thus each portion of the nervous system performs specific functions, but it is the cortex that opens a world of stored information for use by the mind.